Welcome to the fifth lecture on Foundation Models Generative AI. And today should be especially fun because we have two guest lectures. So Professor Marolis Kellis from MIT will show up and give a talk about biology and AI and the AI frontiers in computational biology. Then Artem is here. He's flown in from Silicon Valley to talk about autonomous agents. So it should be a lot of fun. And I'll start off talking about a framework for foundation models, right? So will it be a single foundation model, like a single brain to rule them all? Will OpenAI have a monopoly on AI or not, right? What will be, if not, right, what kind of foundation models will exist? What can you leverage? And I think it's going to be useful if you're a researcher, but also especially if you're in business, to understand what kind of foundation models, technologies that will exist and how you can use them and leverage them. And this is based on a talk that I've been giving to private equity firms and kind of C-suite level at bigger companies around how to survive the AI explosion. Okay, like a lot of things are changing now, and people feel it's a different type of technology. It's changing the landscape, and how do you survive and prosper in this new age? So that's what we're going to figure out today. Okay, so you've seen this before, but a primer. So what was the breakthrough that happened that allowed us to do all of these different advancements that we've been seeing? Well, we've been using ourselves as a reference frame, right, to ask the critical question: how do we learn about the world? How do we go from being a blank slate baby with no knowledge about the world, fairly useless, to becoming a useful, knowledgeable adult? What enables us to learn from the world that we interact with, right? This is a key question in AI. What we've been saying is basically that what's responsible for giving you most of the knowledge that you have about the world, it's not your parents, it's not your teachers, it's not academia, so it's not supervised learning. You don't learn from experts, okay? So that's a technology that we tried for a long time, but it's not the answer. It's helpful, but it's not the answer. Also, it's not your DNA, right? It's not your genetics, it's not your immediate environment, and you're trying to optimize your goals in that environment, so it's not reinforcement learning. Reinforcement learning by itself is not the key answer to how we learn about the world, right? It's helpful, but it's not the main responsible part. So what is it, right? Well, it turns out that most things that we know we learn by ourselves. So this is the key, insight that allows us to do all the things that we're doing right now. And this is possible by defining meaning by the company it keeps. So if you take a dog, right, you don't learn what a dog is from your parent telling you or your emotions guiding you. You learn what a dog is by observing dogs in different contexts, correlating, contrasting dog with other concepts. So how you understand a dog is something that's walked by an owner with a leash. It's something that has an antagonistic relationship with cats. It's something that chases frisbees when those are thrown. This is what allows you to understand what a dog is. And this is how you define what a dog is. And what you get by this is a very relational understanding of meaning, right? And as you learn about dogs by correlating, contrasting dogs with other concepts like cats, you in turn learn what cats are. So it's kind of self-referential and very, very powerful. And you can pick up across modalities, of course, because the word dog will be uttered or named more in context where dogs appear. So it's extremely powerful. So what does this lead to? Well, it leads to that the more relations that you're able to understand, the better understanding you get of meaning. You understanding what a dog is, what a love is, right? You understanding what love is helps you understand what a dog is, because an owner loves his dog. So it's like a lot of synergy networks effects at play. Okay, this is the key insight here. So why not take a huge model with as many parameters as possible and train it on as much data as possible to learn all of these different relations to get the most precise and powerful understanding of meaning, and then use this model basically everywhere. Right? And this is what a foundation model is. Right? This is a key breakthrough, throughout generative AI and everything that we're seeing right now. And also, of course, your brain is a prime example of this. Okay, so here we're going to diverge a little bit how I've thought about this before. So what does this actually mean, right? What does it mean now that we have these foundation models that learn relational meaning, and the more data you train them on, the better they get somehow, and just get bigger and bigger. So one thing that that's happened, right, is that there's been a complete change and transformation in the research world. So 6 years ago, when I was at Stanford, there used to be one research lab data set and AI model for different language tasks, right? So this started off happening initially in language. You would have one data set, one model, one research team working on translation, another one working on question answering, a third one on sentiment analysis, and then a fourth one on predictions, right? In isolation, isolated effort. But they ask themselves, hey, there seems to be a shared perspective here and a shared intelligence being language modeling or language intelligence. Can we optimize that instead? And pool our data and efforts together and optimize single intelligence that is synergetic, because we don't have a separate brain for each language task. So real intelligence should be general and synergetic, right? So that's what they did. We're able now to build these language models that are trained and really understand language in a deep, intelligent way. So all the different tasks that we care about in language are just downstream tasks of this real intelligence, this real foundation model. Okay? And of course, even though a lot of companies are behind in this, the same applies to companies and businesses. If you come to a company today, right, how they think about AI or data or technologies is typically very isolated efforts. Solving something, right? So if you go to a retailer, for example, they might have a separate service and data set and team working on product search, another one for recommendations, a third one for assortment planning, right? Campaigns, marketing. But these, of course, are not separate intelligences. These are very, very synergetic, right? If you're able to recommend the right products at the right time to a user for recommendations, that should influence your marketing. Like, what products should you market to who? So somehow you want to build, right, this intelligence around a company as well. And it's what you can do, right? So you can build a single brain around a company to really get at all the synergies and get the most performance. Okay, so what this leads to is basically, right, so at Stanford now, the only research team that survived and prospers are the one focusing on building a foundation model around language, right? Like the key core intelligence. And also the businesses that build a key core intelligence around their own business space, also the ones surviving. So you're seeing really kind of a major extinction happening. Now the AI hits us, like how do we survive and prosper with this changing the space completely? And that's what we're going to try to understand today, right? So the first question that comes to mind is, okay, if this is the case, where does it stop? Will there be a single AI model or brain to rule them all? Right? Will OpenAI have a monopoly on intelligence? Okay? Well, first off, like who knows in a few hundred years? But what we're seeing now is that in the foreseeable future, that's not going to be the case, right? There's going to be a collection of foundation models. And one way to kind of see how this happens is, let's say you have like a large language model, for example, and when it comes to different applications of large language models in language settings, you might have, law, you might have marketing, you might have writing articles, right? This is still going to be one core intelligence, right? This is not sufficient to split and build completely separate brains. Right? It's going to be the same similar foundation model technology around this. So they're going to subscribe to ChatGPT, maybe fine-tune a little bit, but they're going to share the same model, right? But let's say now you use this language model and come to a new setting, like logistics. Maybe you work with DHL or FedEx or something, and they have like 100 billion data points around these different movements, okay? And you try to apply these large language models, but its intuition fails it. Like, first of all, okay, data is different, it's a completely different setting, and its understanding from what it's learned from the internet and language generally might not apply. And it might come up with a bias that's actually hurtful, right? You want to relearn these things from the data itself, right? So then you start seeing that, okay, there's a different applications, and adding this data and this potential to the big model kind of dilutes its abilities almost, right? It's not helpful. So you can see, a new foundation model, technology and model arriving and being able, right, around logistics. And that's kind of defensible, has a moat, and a large language model is not able to compete. Right, so another way to see this is that, yes, we want to share edges to new concepts to get a more precise understanding of meaning, but also want to make sure that the cost of adding that edge and the dilution that you might get is the value is outweighed somehow, right? You don't want to dilute the model, and you don't want to, add so much cost that the value it gets is not justified, right? Okay, so what we're seeing is that there's not going to be one single AI model to rule them all. So there'll be a collection of different types of brains. So how will they look like? Well, I think it's going to be quite hard to say. We're going to try to think about it and build some kind of intuition and framework around it. And I think we can take inspiration from our own brain in a human setting. And it's going to be a combination a little bit because right? We have human-like intelligence that we want to replicate, that we can be inspired by our own abilities. But also now in a modern economy and civilization, we have so many unnatural and unhuman settings, like logistics, for example, our own intuition might fail us. That this also enables new types of foundation models around settings that we haven't seen before, because we live in a new kind of world. Okay, yes. So in asking what kind of AI models or foundation model technologies that have a unique defensibility, a moat, and a unique selling point, it's important because that will allow you as well to understand what AI models you can leverage and invest in. And it's also going to be key because if you're a researcher, you might want to invest in certain foundation model technology and build it. You might interact with other foundation models, but you want to invest in a specific one. And also as a company, as a business, it's going to be key to be able to identify what type of foundation model is most important to your business cases. So you can incorporate your own know-how, data, and secret sauce, and structure your own competitive advantage. So what have we seen, right? Well, when the large language models and ChatGPT was released, there was a lot of attempts to just build separate brains, let's say, around specialization. So there was a lot of companies, for example, that would take a large language model and fine-tune to different settings just in language. But what we're seeing as well, like you won't have, again, a separate brain for history language, for legal language, for customer service language. Those won't be separate, right? This does not justify a lot of companies that went hyped and focused on specific settings of just language didn't survive and prosper because if they don't have the data, right, if they don't own the channels, that's not sufficient moat to kind of justify their own existence. A big company that's a customer service company will just subscribe to ChatGPT, fine-tune a little bit their own setting, right? It's quite simple, and then use that, right? So there won't be like a separate brain built from scratch in just these specialized settings. Yeah. Right, and again, so techniques here, like prompt engineering, writing the best prompt possible for your setting, doing some kind of prompt tuning and fine-tuning even, like these are not, these are just taking a foundation model core technology, adapting to a new setting, which is very, very powerful. And a lot of companies, of course, are going to use this, but it's not, there's not going to be multiple companies just focusing on this, right? Okay, so these are not separate brains, it's just fine-tuned versions of the same brain. And there might be multiple providers like OpenAI, Cohere, Anthropic, but they're very similar. These are same language, large language model, right? Okay, another way that we initially thought that we would see different types of brains were in terms of different data types. Almost like senses for ourselves. There would be one really big foundation model around language, another really big one, separate one around vision, a third one around audio, etc. This is also not sufficient to justify its own foundation model or technology, because there's a lot of synergies again, right? You can hear a dog, you can smell a dog, you can read about a dog, and somehow these are synergetic things, and you don't want to separate them too much. So it's also not like that's not the proper way to think about how this works. So I think a really good inspiration about thinking what type of foundation models that we will see exist and that we can leverage is taking inspiration from our own brain. Because actually our own brain is a collection of multiple brains interacting and collaborating. And this is a combination, typically they've evolved throughout evolution, a combination of going for both specialized data and specialized application. Right? So it's key to have both. And a lot of times we look at these large language models that we're able to interpret and they do some kind of reasoning and planning. When it comes to this kind of consciousness and rationality, that's in our own brains, that's like we have a brain for that, right? But it's actually a very, very small part of our brain. Most of our brain is, quick, intuitive, automatic systems that show real deep intelligence, but they're not as kind of conscious as maybe, large language model might seem to be, right? But consciousness and planning and rationality is actually a very, very small part of how we live and make our decisions. It's almost in hindsight mostly that we maybe make rational arguments and stories around what we do. So it's going to be a lot of these foundation models as well that are not going for this kind of consciousness. They're going for these automatic systems and intuition, and that's really, really key as well. Okay, right, so if you want to be able to build a defensible brain in terms of foundation model technology, right, a large language model versus like a large behavioral model, it has to be unique both in terms of specialized setting and a specialized type of data. And right, what this means basically is that you need proprietary data and proprietary algorithms to make this work. And for a lot of companies, they won't be able to provide the proprietary algorithms and develop that because it might be too expensive. So they're gonna subscribe to some big model that's already pre-trained with really good algorithms, etc., for their setting, and then incorporate their own data and build on top of that. Right? And again, I mean, all these different models are going to communicate with each other, right? So they're going to interact, etc., but they're going to be specialized in their own ways. And then maybe there's going to be different models, like a large language model can connect all of them in certain ways, but they're going to interact, be specialized, but they're definitely going to be able to work together. Okay, so to recap. Right, so we know by now that meaning is contextual relational, and foundation models are basically leveraging that as much as you can. Okay, so it means the more relations you're able to understand, you get a much more precise and powerful understanding of meaning. But there is a limit somehow, and there's more nuance, right? So we try to scale this as much as possible. So like, well, there's justification for having separate foundation models around certain areas, and those foundation models that will exist will have both proprietary algorithms and data, right? That's key to be able to be defensible as a foundation model technology. Okay, so now we're going to jump and talk a little bit more what this means commercially, right? So now we talked about foundation models, and this also, applies a little bit in terms of research and what you want to focus on as well, but especially when it comes to businesses now. So for the commercial setting, right? So companies are not really babies, but they seem to be almost like human babies in some sense. And what I'm convinced about, and I think what we're starting to see, is that every company that exists right now, every company that will be able to exist in the near future, and to be able to have a moat and defensibility, will have to have one single core intelligence that it leverages, right? One single core model and foundation model around its business that leverages all of its secret sauce and synergies in its setting, right? If it splits those things apart, it dilutes itself. So it has to have one single core model that builds on to structure its intelligence and know-how to be able to be competitive. And this is going to be, summarizing its kind of intelligence around its space. Okay, and it's going to have this core brain. So this is going to be a foundation model that it's going to see what kind of foundation models exist there. And it's going to subscribe to one of them, which is going to be its key foundation model technology, incorporate all of its own data and secret sauce and know-how, and build on top of it. And then, of course, this model itself will communicate and interface with other models that exist, foundation models, but won't be as important to it, right? It won't be able to contain its secret sauce, right? So you might have this core brain that interfaces with a language model and other foundation models, maybe weather or something like that, or vision, and incorporates that and use that, right? It's like using a computer. It's very, very useful and useful assistant, but it doesn't contain its secret sauce and competitive advantage. So it has to build that structured intelligence to a foundation model. And of course, then other companies will be also building their own foundation models that will summarize its own competitive advantage and setting, and they can collaborate and communicate with other companies, etc. All right, so if we're starting to see a little bit that these brains, right, are built across companies. So like if you're not Google, Amazon, you won't be able to build a model from scratch. So you will subscribe to some foundation model technology and incorporate your own data and build on top of it, right? So now we can think a little bit about how this is gonna define industries a little bit, right? So what industries is gonna share a similar foundation model technology? Right, and again, so each company will leverage and build a single core intelligence around its business, but the foundation model technologies may be shared across companies, right? So we might see that when it comes to large language models, like if you're in publishing or in the legal sector, that might be the key foundation model technology that you want to use to incorporate your own data and know-how and leverage, that's going to be your core intelligence. But if you're in retail, right, then your transactional data is much, much more important, and it's the 99% of the data that you have. And then you want to have a model that's able to understand that behavior of consumption and incorporate that effectively, right, and build around that. So that's going to be your core foundation model technology. And then again, you have like logistics, and then financial time series is something as well that isn't really captured well online on the internet, or really complies with human intuition. So there'll be a separate foundation model around those data sets, which are huge, but hidden in companies' databases and not online, right? So that also is a foundation model technology that we're seeing emerging. And again, I want to reiterate that, of course, AI and this new AI is going to be everywhere, like a computer. I mean, it's going to be super useful technology for everybody to use, and that's not really what we're talking about now. There's going to be a difference between having a super useful assistant and also, building your competitive advantage, structuring your intelligence, your know-how and secret sauce around your business, and leveraging that, right? That's going to be your existential kind of competitive advantage, right? Because if you're just using the other models that everybody else is using, you're not really incorporating your own unique setting, right? This is useful assistance, but it's not actually your own unique intelligence, right? That you need to build. And I think as you start thinking about understanding how to build your own defensible brain for your business, it's very, very important to look at the data, okay? So if you're running your business right now, start thinking about what are your competitive advantages and how can you get the data to learn about them, right? So you can structure and build this intelligence at scale. Like, do you have the data channels to track the data that summarizes what you do well? And if there's data out there that you are not able to track, but some other company might be able to track, that you would like to use because it's very synergetic to your setting, then it's key, right, to understand how you can get your hands on data. Because that company that has the data that you would really benefit from is either your best collaborator or your worst competitor. Okay, so we're going to jump now into some more actual specific examples of how we can do this, but also just to kind of quickly mention in a business setting that there's a lot of hype around AI for quite some time. So there's a lot of companies that say that they do AI, but they do the old type of AI and maybe not real AI in an intelligent way. So again, be very skeptical of companies that said to do AI, but they peaked pre-2020, right? These are new technologies, and a lot of the companies that became big and successful before 2020 are not leveraging these new technologies. They're legacy. Okay, if they come in and say, hey, we're going to help you out. Oh, yeah, but we don't need your data. We'll fix it anyways. Well, that's BS, right? The data is the key. That's how you incorporate and help you out. So then also they're not doing the real type of intelligence that needs your data. If they require a lot of manual tuning, right, you're not supposed to do the job. Your data is supposed to do the job. So if you're a retailer, for example, your customers are supposed to tell you what they want by acting your channels. You shouldn't do that by doing a lot of manual tuning and guesswork. Okay, statisticians and pre-use interfaces. Again, like people in data analytics that love to come in and look at certain statistics, like the summaries like mean standard deviations. It's just too compressed, right? It's not nuanced enough. You actually need to train these billion parameter models on your data. You can't just look at the averages and do some kind of wishful storytelling around it. So also be skeptical of that, right? These are not very explainable technologies. You'll train them and then try to figure out what they've learned. And also single function AI companies, right? Again, if somebody says, hey, you're a retailer, oh, we're going to do your search only. We don't do recommendations. We don't do search. It's like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. You're splitting your intelligence apart. Don't have separate services, and don't trust these AI companies to just focus on a single function. Because they're not building real deep general intelligence. They just specialize in building complicated systems. Okay, so I'm going to go through some examples that I've been doing with my startup, Unbox AI. So we build behavior-to-behavior foundation models that generates human actions and wants. So what does it mean? Well, again, like so retail is one of our core areas because consumption is behavior. So if you're in retail, right, ChatGPT is a super useful assistant, okay? But it's not revolutionizing retail at its core because retail at its core is not a text-based language from the internet, and it's very hard to incorporate this data, right? Retail at its core is consumption, and consumption is behavior, right? So Unbox AI and Behavior GPT is that kind of ChatGPT revolution, but for retail and behavior-driven businesses. So they can incorporate their own data and build their own competitive advantage and incorporate that, right? It's not only about using that, oh, hey, we have a helpful ChatGPT assistant that helps you buy things easier. Like, well, everybody can incorporate, build that quite easily. right? You want to have a big, huge model that incorporates billions of your transactional data points, that learns from your customers, and structures your secret sauce and intelligence. Okay, so let's look at one example from retail. And again, what we're doing is that we're building like not one single model for everything, but for everything for this business, which is in retail, right? So it's behavior driven. So we try to build one single core deep intelligence around this business. And we don't think first about the downstream tasks, right? We actually don't care about the downstream tasks initially, right? We just care about building a deep intelligence around the business. The performance on the downstream tasks are just proof that we're actually making progress and solving real things. So it's about building this deep intelligence rather than just solving specific problems. So the first thing you can do when you have this, right, is to also start applying it where it makes the biggest impact. So we started applying this model for making navigation on the e-commerce site. So this is a company that sells wallpapers and posters and canvases online. So made the navigation extremely personalized and tailored, because we can now understand consumers and their behavior, so we can make their experience much more automatic and pleasant. Okay? And this makes a huge impact. And of course, like there's a lot of AI companies that have been doing personalized stuff navigation before, but there's a huge difference. Like it's comparing a horse to a Ferrari, and you need to put your Ferrari where it really matters. And the cool thing as well, right? We had chat bots before ChatGPT, but when you start playing with ChatGPT, you understand this is intelligence at a completely new level. And it's exactly the same thing with these new technologies. Just because it's a similar setting, it has a much better performance and outputs. Again, right, another thing to illustrate that this is important, if you come to a site and you search for something, they have like 1,000 different motives and different versions, but they only have real estate to, this is a top real estate of 6 products, right? So here we can see that we give completely different experience. There's nothing in common between these 2 results here, though they both make sense in terms of searching for blue, which is an abstract search term somehow. In one of the cases, right, it's a family probably with kids looking for something for the kids' room, and we can give results for that. In another case, it's probably some teenager looking for something for the room. But it's extremely important to make unique, tailored experience for people and getting to know them at a very, very, deep level to make it a site that's uniquely theirs, which is possible to do in an e-commerce setting. And it really, makes a difference and drives sales. Again, and then this, of course, leads to increase in terms of revenue and sales, but also applying deep intelligence, might not always just lead to short-term increase in sales. And that might not be the most important. It gives other metrics that are also extremely important for long-term prosperity and revenue, like people being happy, coming back, spending more time, etc. So these are also extremely important KPIs. Anyways, with this, just by doing a more personalized navigation, we're able to increase revenue with 14%, right? Total net revenue with 14%, which of course is huge. Again, this was done with 12x less work. So now there's no need for experts going through, looking at misspelled search queries and tagging things up, because it's done automatically, and we let the customers do the job, right? They tell us what they want, we just need to find it and learn about it. Okay, so some interesting quiz here. So here, for example, again, one of these models that look at similarity of products, right? One is a decent model is trained on behavior online generally, right? So like some kind of general model for online behavior. And another one is highly fine-tuned and specialized for this, European e-commerce shopping of posters and wallpapers and canvases. Right, so in one of the cases, when you look at similarity, if the skylines, one care more about geographical location. So Durham here is close because it's the same place. Another one, when you look at similarity, care more about the color palette. So it's like, well, both of these are very reasonable, but which one is actually the true one for a typical customer at this site? Right, it makes a big difference. What do you think? Well, so it turns out that actually for customers that buy wallpapers and canvases online in Europe, they care much more about the color palette than they care about the product being from the same place. But, but both, of course, make sense of similarity, but one drives sales and one doesn't. Similarly, we have a model is trained and is working reasonably well on internet data, and it looks at similarity, the old one. So you have Clint Eastwood here with a gun. It's a black and white, old movie picture. In one setting, we're recommending other old black and white pictures from movies, right? They seem to be more romantic, something, right? But in other case, when you actually look at customers interacting with this product, similarities, and it's different if you let customers define similarity. Here you can see that people actually care about the gun and like in the cool old movie, and it seems to be more Clint Eastwood focused, and maybe it's a young man or something looking for something for his room, right? And of course, they have nothing in common. Both make sense from just an abstract perspective, but one is given by looking at user behavior, and one is just looking at internet overall. Okay, similarly, we can look at search engine optimization and keywords tagging for products. Right, so a lot of these companies have huge teams that go through all the products to add keywords and categories to maximize interaction and SEO. So here on the top, we have a picture of swans flying over sun with colors here, right? So if you look at an expert at a company saying like, okay, how should they start adding labels to this picture that explains it, right? So they add nature, forest, woodlands, trees, etc. And then you actually look at the AI that's trained on how people interact with this product, what they search for, and learn how actually the language that customers use. You can see here that it says the most obvious thing in this picture that stands out from a user perspective is not nature, forest, trees, woodlands, it's a sunset. But that's missed by an expert. It's very, very hard, of course. Like, how do you know that sunset is the thing that's the most important thing in how people think about this product? It's very hard, but and it's not very intuitive. But if you look at all this data, it picks it up and learns what makes this thing stand out. And similarly, in the thing below here, right, we have a lot of different human experts putting categories and labels here, but they're missing the keywords that people would want to have when they interact with this product, right? And how they think about segmenting products, right? Temple and Japanese and Zen, and they're missing all these words, and this makes a huge difference. Okay, so and again, this is very, very nuanced. This company has 21 countries they're active in, 13 different languages, and you also want to be smart because in a lot of different places there's multiple languages being used. Like in Sweden, for example, we love to throw in English words in our everyday vocabulary. So then you want to be able to learn language from scratch and how people use them to describe wallpapers and canvases in different types of languages. So this model actually starts picking up, look at all this data, starts picking up and learn languages and the nuances differs between different markets. Okay, and then, of course, this is just kind of consumer-facing things. This model was then used for a lot of different settings because there's a deep intelligence around your business, so it can use this for store planning in physical stores. It can do, again, quality assurance and master data to find mistakes and make sure everything is legal and correct. And also it can use it to business intelligence. Like, okay, you understand your different markets in Europe. Okay, if you want to go into Belgium, a new market, how does it relate to other markets? What's the best strategy to go in there and succeed? What product should you focus on? So it's a very deep intelligence now that you can use everywhere. Okay, another example is from Workforce. And here again, we try to build a model for everything around this consumer service company. Okay, the Workforce, we call it. They do customer service. They have 50,000 employees. 30,000 employees leave every year. So it's a huge cost. It's called attrition. So people leave fairly early in customer service when they do phone calls and customer support. It's a huge cost. They interact with 500,000 candidates that they want to hire every year. So this is a huge cost for them. So the outline was like, hey, if they're able to understand better who's going to leave and when, it's going to be able to reduce cost dramatically. Okay, but when we came to them, it's like, well, we don't care about people leaving, right? There's attrition. We don't care about the downstream tasks. We care about building a core intelligence around your employees and your business and getting to know your employees, right? So then we build and look at all these behavioral data points around employees to get to know who they are and how, based on their behavior. And we started looking at that first. And then when we solved that and we were able to build an intelligence that understands and able to predict what the employees can do, then we look at a specific case of attrition. And to our surprise, when we built this model and we then started fine-tuning it on attrition of predicting who's going to leave and when, the model was able to predict if a person is going to leave the next 2 weeks or not with a 91% accuracy, which is unprecedented in this setting. And we came there, it's been a huge effort, right? Like big consultancy firms coming in, spending millions of dollars, doing surveys and data analytics with basically no results. They came in as well, so like, hey, we have tons of data. We have 10 to 20,000 surveys and questionnaires that we've done on employees. We're like, 20,000 data points are nothing in this setting, right? And then we looked at these surveys, and there was like zero correlation between what people answered on these surveys and how they actually behaved. So what we did instead is that we looked at the behavioral data, because actions don't lie. And then we look at the behavioral data, we can look at data being tracked, which is much cheaper, and you can get to like 100 million data points quite quickly. Okay. Also, I've been talking a little bit with different insurance companies because they rely a lot on data and predictions. This is, I think, it's an interesting industry where actually I wonder if it's going to be able to survive and prosper. Is it possible to build a single model around insurance? And the problem for insurance, for example, is that it spans so many other industries, and they don't typically have control over the data channels. So I think it's going to be very hard for an insurance company to provide both the best healthcare insurance and the best real estate insurance. Like if you're not a real estate developer and you're able to gather all the data around how people, how properties behave and how people act around them and how things actually turn out, it's going to be very hard to build a real competitive advantage in intelligence because you don't own those data channels. So for insurance companies, for example, I think it's going to be interesting space to see how they developed and if they're able to still provide the best predictions if they don't control the data, and how they cannot spread themselves too thin by saying we're going to do insurance in a lot of different areas, right? You want to do that in perhaps a single area and build up some intelligence there. Okay, and lastly, again, this doesn't only apply to companies, this applies to any entity in a commercial space. So if, for example, if you're a private equity fund as well, you also need to think about how to leverage these technologies. So something that we've been working on is to build a single model in intelligence around a private equity company. So typically, if you're in private equity, you think about horizontal and, for example, vertical integration. You want to pool talent across your companies that are in production. But it's also so important now to think about sharing intelligence and having synergies in intelligence across the companies. Data and AI, right? Like AI integration. So that you are able to build this core model around all these different companies because you own a majority in them, and they can then get all the synergies of actually putting the data and the know-how together, and you can leverage this. And now when you add a new company, you know exactly what they're going to add to this intelligence, that they fit in, and that they can benefit from the synergies and network effects immediately. Right? And it's also very important to structure your intelligence because you don't want to rely on a single brilliant person or like some fingertip feeling. You want to build and structure intelligence so you're more robust to these things. Okay, so to summarize. Right, this new AI revolution, we know it's foundation models. So understanding what type of foundation models that will exist out there so that you can leverage is going to be key. And that the process of doing this is understanding the core intelligence that drives your business area. Right? And you need to capture that and be able to structure what makes your business unique and successful into real structured intelligence, like a foundation model. Right? And it starts off by identifying the data that's key for that. And you need to do it early and do it really well and do it now, right? Because people starting to doing this, and it's being basically a lot of extinctions because they're not actually capturing the intelligence that they need. And they don't have the data channels to do it. And you need to make sure you do. And I think everybody can agree for a lot of businesses, right? Basically, a key competitive advantage and your existential justification is that you have some unique intelligence around what you do. And before, I think it was more indirectly, but now it's more and more directly, that you need to capture this intelligence in a structured way more and more, right, through these foundation models. Okay. All right, thank you so much. That was it. And if you have any questions, I can take them out.